What is going on YouTube? Andrew Miller from Hook'emHeadlines.com coming back at you all today with a kind of quick breakdown, not really breaking any news, but talking about the hire of the new Texas wide receivers coach, Chris Jackson. It was reported today that Texas will be hiring the former Jacksonville Jaguars wide receivers coach, Chris Jackson, for the same role at Texas. He was in his first year as the Jags wide receivers coach, was part of a team that was one of the surprise teams of the NFL, without a doubt, just getting eliminated by the Kansas City Chiefs in the second round of the playoffs in the divisional round last weekend. He was considered to be the front runner for the job here for the last week or so. We can cover over to the site a little bit that a lot of the buzz surrounding the best or top candidate was mostly having his name involved recently, and so looks like Steve Sarkisian got his guy. And this is a really interesting hire, and I'll mention a few reasons why, but going to do a few different parts to this video. I will also put a link in the description below for kind of a deep dive that I personally did on Chris Jackson, his background, what he brings to Texas, what his profile is like from his time as a player and coach in college and the NFL. And so, yeah, let's go ahead and jump on into it. Starting with his background, we'll kind of jump back to the beginning here. It sounds like he started playing organized football in the mid-1990s at Orange Coast College. He averaged more than 20 yards a catch in his first time playing organized football at OCC. I believe his final year there was in 1994. There's not a ton of information out there about that, but from what I could find from some old articles, that looked to be, or those two things I could find. He wound up landing at Washington State, which is where his career really took off in the mid to late 1990s. He played with former number 1 overall pick that I'm sure a lot of you are familiar with, Ryan Leaf. Became his favorite target during the 1997 season, which was Jackson's breakout campaign at Wazoo. Went over 1,000 receiving yards, I believe 11 receiving touchdowns, and generically one of Wazoo's best football seasons in the last few decades. They wound up making it to the Rose Bowl and pushed number 1 Michigan to the brink at the time that, again, this was before the BCS National Championship game was played, so they ended up playing number 1 ranked Michigan to a 5-point loss. So had a nice final run there at Wazoo in 97. Then he wound up going undrafted in 1998, was signed by the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Never played an actual live game down in the NFL until the 2000 season with the Tennessee Titans. Then ended up getting some other live game reps with the Packers in 02 and 03. But nothing more than some reps here and there. Floated around various practice squads as well in the just really throughout the 2000s. But where he made most of his noise in terms of actual production in professional football was in the Arena Football League. He was a 2-time AFL Offensive Player of the Year, 3-time AFL First Team All-Pro. So obviously had some sensational seasons there. His professional football career wrapped up in 2014. I believe he had a comeback season with the Arizona Rattlers in the AFL. And I don't remember if they wound up winning the title that year, but either way, he had a pretty good season in his late 30s, and that was his last year before hanging up the cleats for good. Throughout the next couple years, he was involved in football here and there. He was still a wide receivers coach or wide receiver trainer. I believe he was a private wideout trainer throughout the mid-2010s before he ended up landing his first NFL coaching job in the late 2010s. And this is where we'll transition to talk about more of him as a coach. His first position in the NFL, I believe, was in 2018 as an interim under head coach Matt Nagy with the Chicago Bears. He was a pretty fast riser with the Bears. He got promoted to be a defensive assistant in 2019, and then got promoted again in 2020 to be an assistant wide receivers coach. He held that role for 2020 and 2021 with the Bears before Matt Nagy ended up getting fired after 4 seasons as the Bears head coach. After his tenure with the Bears came to an end, Jackson was picked up pretty quickly by Doug Peterson to be on his staff with the Jacksonville Jaguars. That was back in February of last year. And he pretty much surpassed all expectations during his time as the Jags wide receivers coach. I'm sure if you're a Texas fan, you've heard a lot about it in the last few hours and just throughout the day since this hiring came about, or maybe you read into it before when he was, one of the top candidates for the job. But he coached up some really good wideouts there in Jacksonville. Christian Kirk, who was a first-year wideout, free agent signing for the Jaguars last offseason, he ended up having the best season of his career, his first 1,000 receiving yard season, and career-high 8 touchdowns. I covered it a little bit on my deep dive at the site. Again, link to that will be in the description below. But, Christian Kirk had a lot of good things to say about Chris Jackson from what I could find on past interviews from some research that I've done throughout the last week or 10 days. And vice versa. That seemed like a really conducive, successful, and just a really tight coach-player relationship that Jackson and Kirk had in Jacksonville. Zay Jones was another guy that had a career year with the Jags in 2022. Had a career-high 823 receiving yards, had 5 touchdowns, which was the second-best tally of his career in a regular season. And just in general, the entire receiving core for the Jags was really impressive, surpassed expectations, without a doubt. The Jaguars as a whole, like I said, were one of the surprise teams in the NFL. They played the Chiefs last weekend to a one-possession loss. And I don't know of anyone who really pegged the Jaguars as making it to the divisional round and being a little more than one score away from making it to the AFC Championship game this year. So Jackson was part of a very successful staff there with the Jaguars. So let me pivot now to a little bit of what he will bring to the table for Texas and the impact that he will have on Texas in 2023 and beyond. So this is a little bit of an incomplete topic when you're talking about Jackson as a college wide receivers coach. He doesn't, I'm using this as a preface before I get into kind of what boxes he might check for Texas and, where he can have a positive impact on the program right away. He's never been a collegiate coach, and so, his impact on the recruiting trail is just mostly going to be based around speculation, personality traits, known public relationships, things like that. And like I said, just mostly speculation. Developing players at the collegiate level is different than the NFL, but there's definitely some things that we can pick up on that, that he'll bring in terms of credibility from his time as an NFL player and professional football player and wide receivers coach that should carry over to the collegiate level as well. But there's 2 things that really stick out to me about Jackson and what he'll bring to the table that really check some big-time boxes for Sark in this program. The first one, I do remember the quote. It's from Orange Bloods or Inside Texas, but it came about a week or 2 ago saying that one of the traits that Sark was really looking for a wide receivers coach was a demanding technician. Essentially someone that will have a good grasp on the wide receivers room from both a personality perspective and a player development perspective. We've seen a good number of wide receivers coaches roll through the 40 in the last decade that didn't have the desired impact and just really didn't develop the wideouts at the level you need to at this type of program and to ultimately find success in the passing game. And I think Jackson is the type of guy that can bring, I really think Jackson is just the type of guy that obviously will bring the attitude and be able to set the tone. I mentioned earlier, he's been an NFL wide receivers coach now for a couple of years, and he played in the NFL, so he's got that credibility, and he showed in Jacksonville during the 2022 campaign that he can get a lot out of some different wideouts, and it seems like from what his players said about him, and what he was able to do at Jacksonville, that from a technical standpoint, that he's going to be able to get some of these guys on the 40 on point here very soon. I'm going to be doing an article here on the site either later today or tomorrow talking about the wide receivers that could benefit the most. But I'm thinking guys like, Jordan Whittington, maybe a guy that is going to be making that jump to the NFL next year, that could really use, assuming he stays healthy for a full season, that'll be a big part of his draft stock. But also assuming he can have the most consistent season of his collegiate career and, really show some more polish in his route versatility, and his ability to make some plays after the catch. And, I think the overall toughness and leadership qualities are already there for Whittington. So having someone with the experience and relatability like Jackson coming into this wide receivers room, I think will be nothing but positive for Jay Witt. I think about some other wideouts that are going to need a little bit more development, like Brennan Thompson, like Ryan Niblett. That from just like a refinement and technical standpoint, are going to need a bit of work before they're ready to assume full-time starting reps. And again, someone like Jackson that has worked with wide receivers at the private, as a high-level private wide receivers coach, as an NFL wide receivers coach, and someone that, again, was a professional wide receiver for, a decade and a half, he should be able to help these guys right away in a way that, just again, in terms of the experience and personality that maybe Brennan Marion couldn't. Marion's a younger guy. He didn't have the same experience in terms of like playing career in professional football. So that's something of note as well. And Marion was never a coach in the NFL like Jackson was. So, like I said, from the technical standpoint, I think Jackson checks a lot of the boxes there. And the second of the two boxes that I wanted to note, that I think that Jackson will really check in terms of what Sark was looking for, is going to be the ability to kind of command respect and manage some of these personalities well that will be in the wide receivers room. I mean, I think this is a necessary quality for a number of different position groups. Each one's different, but you got to manage some big personalities when you're, running backs coach or defensive backs coach or wide receivers coach. These are just some bigger personalities, kind of what you need out of this position group. And so I really think, again, I mentioned this over and over again, but the ability of Jackson to probably connect with these guys, given just what I've heard about his personality and the level of relatability that he brings to the table, along with just the fact that he's been in some different situations in the NFL and he seems to have managed some different wide receiver rooms really well at the NFL level. Being able to do that is something that should still translate back down to the collegiate level. Sark's a guy that's coached in the NFL as well, and so, in terms of the transition here and being able to provide some guidance and, how to, connect with some of these guys in the wide receiver room and, get a good grasp on the personnel there and the personalities, Sark will be, I think, a good, kind of mentor, kind of just providing some guidance there that should be able to help ease the transition for Jackson. And then the last thing I wanted to mention just in general in terms of what he brings to Texas, I talked about when I was doing this transition earlier of, he's never really been a recruiter before, outside of, maybe getting some guys out of free agency or, trying to win guys over in the NFL. And so this will be, just the whole recruiting game will be something that, while he needs to adjust to it pretty quickly because we are in the thick of the 2024 cycle now, I think there's a lot of traits that Jackson has personality-wise and on his resume that should really, really resonate with a lot of Texas's top recruits, and that should help him ultimately succeed in building a lot of the relationships that he needs to and foster a lot of the relationships that maybe guys like Brennan Marion and, maybe Steve Sarkisian had built, whether it's Steve Sarkisian handing off some of the recruiting duties for certain wideouts to Jackson, or again, it's kind of taking and fostering these relationships that Marion had built in the last year. Jackson, he's got some big targets that he's got to go after right away. Like 5-star Micah Hudson is the one that sticks out to me the most. Someone that seemed very keen on and very interested in who Texas was going to be hiring next as their wide receivers coach. He'd mentioned in multiple interviews since his surprise, if you will, junior day visit last weekend. And so, he's going to be put to the test right away in multiple regards, and I don't think any bigger than recruiting. But we do have spring ball right around the corner, and so he's going to have to get to work right away, being able to get to know these guys and get set for the spring drills. They're a little bit more than a month away from beginning, and so I think this is a good hire, but he just finished having a tremendous run in the NFL, and he's going to have to get right back down to work with another new position in college, something that's going to be brand new to him. So, I'll be interested to follow, and we will continue to kind of monitor, his progress and, how he's doing with the Longhorns here in the coming weeks and months. Whether it's spring ball or the recruiting trail, we'll have you covered there. But anyway, for Andrew Miller at hook'emheadlines.com, that's pretty much all I got on the hire of Chris Jackson. Excited to see what he can do here. That's pretty much it.